Like and subscribe right now, or else this will be in your bed tonight. r/AskReddit by Planet Reddit. Doctors who've actually answered the question. Is anyone here a doctor? What happened? Guy on a train was drunk and appeared to be in some distress and vomiting. When I got to the car, it was obvious to me that he was not vomiting because he was drunk. He was vomiting coffee ground emesis, an upper GI bleed. He was disoriented, likely for the same reason. The man was definitely not drunk. I turned him over to an ambulance at the next stop, spoke briefly with paramedics and then got back on the train and continued to my mother's town. But this was days after I graduated. I had not yet done a residency. Hasn't happened since. Important note in case anyone missed it. If anyone is vomiting and what comes out looks like coffee grounds, it means they are bleeding internally and need to go to the hospital immediately. This right here is honestly wizardry. I know you do 7 years, but how do most general practitioners know so much and retain the information so well? This seems like a super niche thing to know, as I'm sure are many other diagnoses in your arsenal. How? Please tell me your secrets. Transatlantic flight from Paris to SFO. Women developed a headache while watching a movie with her husband. Starting having seizures, vomiting and urinary incontinence. Took her to the back of the plane and tried to work the problem while we diverted to Goose Bay, Labrador. Her and her devastated husband got off and were medevaced to St. John's, where she died. Our flight couldn't leave since we had used all the medical supplies which every flight needs. So we had to wait till supplies arrived from another United serviced airport. Perhaps an aneurysm. So not much we could have done. Oh my gosh, this is so tragic. Got to wonder if the decrease in pressure caused it to happen to a weakened artery or vein capillary in her brain. Was on a flight to London and the call went out at 5:30 am. I went to the back of the plane as directed and I eventually was told to go to the seat of a passenger. When I got to his seat, he was slow to respond to my questions, but he was alert and could tell me where he was and where we were going. Turns out he was a chronic opioid user for pain and uses benzodiazepines like Ativan for anxiety. Well, he is afraid to fly and anticipated that the rush through the airport would cause more pain. So naturally he doubles up on his opioids, plus his Ativan. Plus he decides to have a couple of drinks mid-flight. He was basically so drugged up that his seatmates thought he was having a stroke. The stewardesses asked me if I wanted the captain to land the plane. But because he wasn't in any danger and we were about an hour from London, we just carried on and monitored the man. Just a few days ago, though, I walked into a bank and noticed a man lying beside the ATM. There was someone at the other one who was acting like everything was normal. I told the bank attendant and we approached the guy. Turns out he was a chronic alcoholic who hadn't had a drink in a while and was in alcohol withdrawal and had a seizure shortly after arriving. I don't know how long he was lying there or why absolutely nobody made mention that there was a man on the ground with vomit beside him. People were walking past him like it was normal. It's surprising and kinda sad how many people don't know how bad alcohol withdrawals can be, so they don't know that the person is at a serious risk. I treated a man who arrested after serial seizures because he tried to quit cold turkey. His wife said that he sobered up because their first grandchild had just been born. That man died in the ER. One of my saddest cases. Not me. But I was volunteering at a race event. A man had just crossed the marathon finish line and went into cardiac arrest. While we were panicking and trying to get emergency services over, literally 2 seconds later, a whole race team of doctors, nurses and such crossed the finish line and saw what was happening. They sprang into action, and the guy ended up getting all the attention he needed and was fine in the end. It could not have been more fortuitous timing. It was almost comical. Not quite the same thing. But I once got stuck in an elevator with 6 elevator engineers. They had the doors open and we were out in less than a minute. Don't worry mate. We're elevator engineers. Yeah. Sure. Good one. Let's just press the call B. Hey. Stop. Don't mess with it, you'll just make it worse. Oh. The door's open. I work in imaging, specifically MRI. The big magnet, in a large trauma hospital. While I am BLS and first aid certified, I generally don't jump up unless everybody has that deer in headlights glazed look. I picked up some OT and was driving home after the extra shift. Around 10:30, I see a truck on its top. And a circle of people watching. Yup. Deer in headlights. Might wanna make sure whoever in the truck is out. So. Park my car. Hop out in my scrubs. Some bystander, she's a doctor. Shit. No. Not a doctor. Not even carrying gloves for what I'm about to walk over to see. Poor guy is sitting upright against his upside down truck. A nice degloved scalp, black and blood everywhere. Your scalp bleeds forever. A bystander hands me her shirt. And I use that as a makeshift barrier to hold the guy's neck until EMT arrives. Somebody yells for me to stop the bleeding on his scalp. Somebody hands me their belt. Sir. You can't use a belt to stop head bleeding. It's not very nice. Edit, thanks for the gold. But it won't stop the bleeding either. Sure you can. You wrap it around his neck in a tourniquet. Okay. That may be overkill. Never mind. In any other situation I probably would have laughed. I sure hope that guy laughed about it when he got home. I sure did. Just because you saw them use a belt as a tourniquet on some TV show doesn't mean it applies in every scenario. Well, the doctor in question is my father. Not myself. But we were on a plane coming home from vacationing in Florida when, during the latter third of the flight, a man came stumbling down the aisle and nearly fell down as he passed our row. A few of us started to get up, asking if he was alright. And he quickly got up and darted into the bathroom. But not before we saw that his skin was a horrible ash grey. Dad speculated that he was having some kind of diabetic emergency. Guy disappeared into the bathroom and was in there for a long time. And after a while the most horrific smell began to waft out. A flight attendant eventually went to check on him, opening the door just a crack, the smell filling the whole plane, and was soon joined by more attendants. And after some talking amongst themselves, one asked, is anyone on board a doctor? My father stood up and dutifully went back there. And when he opened the door to go in, we could all see that there was shit all over the door and walls of the bathroom. Turned out the guy had consumed a lot of wine and shrimp cocktails for what would have been breakfast. And obviously something went awry. So, that kicked off a half-hour or more sort of standoff where the flight staff tried to convince the man to let them take him off in a wheelchair. During which they turned off the AC and had us all close our windows and stay in our seats. On a sweltering summer afternoon. While the poo stank permeated every inch of the plane. People were starting to gag all the way up front. Basically, Dad finally convinced the flight staff that having all the passengers get sick would be infinitely worse and to let everyone leave. Since the poor shit covered dude was not gonna budge until the coast was clear. There wasn't a whole lot he was able to do for the guy otherwise. But I guess at least he spared a bit of his dignity. Oh my god. This has to be one of the best stories here. I don't understand though why being drunk means getting poop all over the walls and door. I mean, I've been drunk a lot but I don't have projectile poop like that. The shrimps from the many shrimp cocktails maybe weren't that fresh. And probably caused some food poisoning, hence the grey face, with very wrong digestion that led to an emergency explosive exit. Not me but my mother. We were sitting in a high-speed train for 4 hours and reserved some seats for it. I saw a guy sitting opposite to us with a lot of folders, so I assumed he needed to do some paperwork for his job. After 2 hours they stopped the train suddenly and called for a doctor in our part of the train. The guy and my mother stand up in seconds and just look at each other with confusion. P. What kind of doctor are you? She. Cardiologist. P. Oh thank God. I am a gynecologist. Tell me if it is a birth. It was a metabolism issue. Nothing serious in the end. Edit. SRY about the spelling. This is me now. When someone asks for a doctor, the first thing I do is clarify that I'm a psychiatrist. And that tends to be the end of that. My son was playing baseball and took a hard grounder to the face. He was bleeding pretty bad. So the coach, another fellow, and I ran onto the field. The fellow said that he was a dentist and asked me if I was a doctor. I said, yeah. I have a PhD in physics. He kind of looked at me funny. Then we walked my son off the field. I didn't realize until later that he didn't know that I was the father. And he probably thought I was some smartass running on the field to offer medical help. Well, physics played a role in the injury. So, my kid's face exerted the same energy on the ball as the ball on his face. So perhaps we could dissect the ball. Medical student here, whose dad's a doc and mom's a nurse. We've had multiple holidays where this happened. The thing that was the most impressive for me, however, was a holiday where I was 11 or so. We were swimming in an indoor pool. Dad was outside. Mom was with me and my little sister. All of a sudden people start screaming and a 3-year toddler is pulled out of the water. Blue and not breathing. Mom immediately started the Heimlich, upside down, to get the water out of the lungs. While my sister and I got Dad. By the time we got back, the kid was conscious and crying. Dad took him to the medic's cabin and had to literally convince the guy there to give the kid oxygen. Happy ending though. The kid made it, without any brain damage or fake. We still get a Christmas card every year. But yeah, that was a lot to take in as a kid. In my eyes. My parents will always be heroes for that. How sweet of him her to thank you every year with a card. Cousin's wedding. Family member flew in from South America. Had a heart attack and was no pulse. Dentist guest began CPR. Doc guest relieved and ambulance showed up. Pulse was weak. But he was alive. Doc rode to hospital. Wedding reception continued. Family member flew home and was still alive years later. That's amazing. The survival rates of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest are very low. My dad must be one lucky sumbabik. Then. Obligatory not a DR but friend's rich family of Canadian hippies took me to a jazz festival in New Orleans. During dinner a drunk guy at another table started choking and Heimlich, by waiter, was ineffective. His dad, a stoned, drunk, sunburnt family practitioner, hopped up and delivered some kind of advanced sternum punch and saved the day. Anyway, dinner was free. And a ton of drinks. Advanced sternum punch. That sounds painful lol. Very. Ever get the wind knocked out of you? It isn't uncommon to break ribs doing CPR or Heimlich maneuvers because of the force necessary to move the amount of air needed to dislodge the object. Or circulate blood effectively. Obligatory not a doctor. But I was sat next to one on a plane from Shanghai to Detroit. About 2 hours into the flight. The announcement comes over the PA. The guy next to me sits bolt upright and looks around for a flight attendant. The look in his eyes said he had been waiting for this moment his entire professional life. Once the doctor business had been taken care of, the flight attendant stopped by periodically to give him updates and lots of free miles. Apparently it was a man in his 20s with a history of seizures that had never been to see a doctor about them. The older flight attendants proceeded to give the young man a stern talking to for the remainder of the flight. Row. He had never seen a doctor about them, or was it he hadn't found a medication that worked effectively? No one likes having seizures. There are many types of seizures and my heart goes out to him. I hope everyone learns appropriate seizure first aid since there are an overwhelming number of damaging myths. My understanding was that he just dealt with them as they came and hadn't seen a doctor about them for whatever reason. 12 hours of well-intentioned henpecking may have changed that. Though. I was on a flight recently and a woman started having a seizure in the route ahead of me. I'm not a medical doctor, but when they asked if there was a doctor on board, literally 7 or 8 people came forward at the same time, including the guy sitting next to me. Apparently there was a pediatrics conference that they were all going to. It was a really interesting situation to be in, especially since several of the doctors had different opinions on what to do and the flight attendants were trying to help but also crowd control all the opinions. Mostly because there were some things legally that they couldn't do. The lady having the seizure was fine in the end and they had people ready when we landed to check her out further. I've shared this before, but reminds me of this. The American Heart Association, AHA, president, who is a cardiologist, had a minor heart attack while at the AHA meeting a year or so ago. It was the day after he gave remarks on his family history of heart disease. Surrounded by a lot of cardiologists. Though. He ended up getting a stent. The president of the American Heart Association Dr. John Warner had a minor heart attack Monday during the organization's scientific conference taking place in Anaheim, California. CNN.com link. Literally the ideal place to have a heart attack. My wife responded to this on a flight with a Middle Eastern carrier. A passenger had collapsed on the flight. The crew would not let her see the patient, demanding her doctor's card first. This is not something the UK General Medical Council produces. Eventually, when no other option was available, my wife convinced them she is in fact a doctor and was allowed to check the passenger. He turned out to be diabetic and hypoglycemic. So quickly resolved in a complete anticlimax. No. There was no special treatment for being a doctor or assisting. And the crew didn't even say thank you. I was gonna joke and make a response like this. But here you have the example of the real thing. I don't get it. I graduated med school 13 years ago and over half my class was female. I still occasionally get comments like, I expected a male doctor. My favorite response is they let women be doctors now. Kinda joking with the patient, but also making them realize they are biased. It happened to my sister on a flight when someone passed out. She, an OBGYN, responded as did a radiologist. An ER nurse also came up to see if she could help, which my sister appreciated since it had been a long time since medical school. I think it ended up not being serious, but she went back to her seat after assessing that the patient wasn't in labor or in need of a pap smear. The radiologist probably only came to get your sister to stop ordering unnecessary tests. Did she have her pap smear instruments with her in her carry-on? In real life, on a flight, some lady had esophageal syncope, fainted, and I brought her knees close to her body to improve blood flow and the flight attendants gave her water. She felt better and we continued to our destination. On Reddit, I've told a bunch of interesting stories from my time in medical school and occasionally get PM'd pictures of boobs and or Josh Peck. Sending just Josh is only one boob. You clearly asked for boobs, not boob. How rude of those people. Why Josh Peck? Indian mom. Is anyone here a doctor? Doctor. Yes, I'm. Indian mom. Will you marry my daughter? WTF lol. Yeah. That caught me off guard too. I mean, no one says yes. I'm instead of yes. I am. Not a doc, but a nurse. Heard loud crash outside the Waffle House I was eating at. Ran outside to see what was up. Kid screaming for doctor. Run up to see what is up and his leg is sticking the wrong way. Immobilize it and stay with him till medics arrive and then go back to my double bacon cheese steak melt. Most nursing I've read all day. Flying to an island for a holiday a couple of years ago. The first call was, is there a physiotherapist on the plane? Which was predictably followed a couple of minutes later by, is there a doctor? A very nice lady had dislocated her prosthetic hip when the man in the seat in front of her reclined sharply into her and she shuffled to adjust her position. She was in agony. The plane had a fairly decent medical kit, so I was able to get an IV cannula into her and give her some reasonable painkillers. However, there was no chance of me popping the hip back in. And where we were going didn't really have a hospital. So I told the crew they'd have to land somewhere that did. Once she'd got off the plane and been taken to hospital, there was some problem with a sensor or something and we couldn't take off again. So everyone had to stay overnight in this unexpected destination. Other passengers were not best pleased and I could not sink far enough into my seat when this was announced. To add to this, the actual destination, which we reached the next day, was a resort that most of the passengers were going to. So I had to endure strangers calling me doc for the whole week. The lady got her hip sorted and sent me a lovely card once she got home. The flight crew were ace as well, and my partner and I got to visit the cockpit on the return flight. It was the same pilot and he remembered me. The person who asked responded with, well, you're a nerd. Years of ASDF movies rushing back into my brain gave me vertigo. Hand smack TV static. Not me. And not a doctor. But my cousin, an ER nurse, was on a flight and they made the "is there anyone in the medical field on board" announcement. She responded. And they took her to an elderly passenger who was in some distress, heart palpitations. If I remember correctly, She monitored the lady's vitals and the flight crew was ready to do an emergency detour if my cousin had determined the lady was in danger. She wasn't. As it turns out, the lady was on her way to the same cruise my cousin was headed to. They ran into each other on the boat and the lady bought my cousin a drink. So, a happy ending. This will probably get buried. But I work in a dermatology office in a building full of family doctors, dentists, eye doctors, and physiotherapists. At the staff Christmas party one year, one of the spouses of a doctor had a heart attack. Ike. There were enough doctors and nurses present to take care of the issue very promptly. And the outcome was positive. At our dinner table, the dermatologists had all been drinking wine by this point and yelled out, "Well, if anyone gets a rash, let us know." That's such typical doctor humor, lol. Nurse midwife. Not a doctor. So whenever is there a doctor on board? Call goes out, I'll lay low and hope someone more qualified volunteers. But twice I've admitted I'm a nurse and been drafted to help. Once was on a 10-hour red-eye flight. I'm still shocked that on a packed 747 I'm the best they could come up with. Fortunately it was just a woman having severe gas pains from sitting still too long and wearing Spanx. I told her to take off the Spanx and walk for a while. For my service I was given a little gift bag of snacks and alcohol, which was so nice but kind of embarrassing. Another time was on a city bus and a man had a seizure. The driver stopped right at the corner adjacent to the local medical school. I thought surely there's some overzealous med student on board who wants to take this one. But no. I finally admitted I was a nurse when the poor driver started to look frantic. All I did was sit with the guy until the paramedics arrived and pointed out that his dentures had fallen on the ground. Fellow nurse here. I was flying home from Cuba and was the only one to answer when they asked for medical professionals. Was a very pregnant woman with abdo pain, so it would have been perfect for you. But my opinion was more along the lines of a UT. They asked me later to check a blood pressure on someone else with chest pain who it turns out was a forensic pathologist. The airline gave me a $500 credit to use though. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.